Coming back to our top story now, pupils from 3 different schools say they're standing up against discrimination and inequality at their respective schools. In the most recent incident, matriculants at Bishop's High School in Cape Town wrote a letter claiming the scourge of racism has been ongoing for decades. To chat more about institutionalized racism, specifically as it pertains to schools, we're joined via Skype by diversity specialist Terry Oakley-Smith. Thanks very much for your time this afternoon. So why do you think now, I know in the broader global context it's very relevant that we're seeing this resurgence of Black Lives Matter protests around the globe and that should translate home. But as it pertains specifically to schools, do you think this gap or hiatus that we've had has had anything to do with giving people time to think about the kind of institutions they want to go back to?
That's a very interesting point, Annalie. But I think we have to be honest with ourselves. In South Africa, we're dealing with 2 pandemics at the moment. One of them is COVID. The other one is racism, which is also a global pandemic. And I suspect that more people have died from the latter than the former. What we seem to do in South Africa is we jump to each incident. This week, for example, there were 4 different schools where there were reports of racial incidents, racial language being used. In one school, a teacher was fired, but it was kept under the carpet. So these things are endemic. They're going on all the time. So the only way we can address them is in a process-driven way. And yet we sort of try and attack them as if they're a target each time something happens. I mean, even the idea of the ANC Alliance now starting a campaign against racism, so that every Friday for the next 3 weeks we must wear black. I mean, do we really think that that is going to address the fundamental problems that we have around race in South Africa? I really doubt it.
So when we look at one of these schools, particularly Durban Girls College has instituted an internal investigation. In your experience of facilitating transformation in various organizations and at various levels, are internal organizations fruitful? I mean, internal investigations, excuse me.
Yes. You know, Annalie, I think it depends on a whole lot of things. If it's just once-off internal investigation, I really doubt it. But if it's embedded in a policy which looks at racism and which spells out how the school considers racism and what the school's prepared to do about it, and then if internally they have the kind of people to sit on that committee who really understand racism and all the implications that come with it, yes. But I suspect that most schools, you know, that there are teachers that are very learned in teaching their subjects, but I doubt that they really have the skills necessary to address these kind of issues.
And this internal-external debate has also been brought to the fore by the matric class at Bishop's, another school in Cape Town. They've in their presentation to the school, they have a list of demands. There are 20 demands. A number of those demands relate specifically to external procedures to prevent institutionalized discrimination. I'm not going to go through them, but just to give you an idea, they go all the way from having external discussions and presentations for new grade 8s, for teachers, for parents about the oppression of minority groups, all the way through to the decolonization of the syllabus, to external disciplinary and peer review processes in instances where racism has said to have occurred either between pupils or from teachers. They also demand the establishment of a pride society at Bishop's in order to provide a safe space and platform for LGBTQI+ community. So they're not only addressing endemic racism, but they're addressing discrimination on broader levels. How advanced is this?
Well, these things are all linked, and you know, it sounds like the learners at Bishop's are really doing a very good thing. But what I would say is absolutely critical, and I have worked in some schools, is that it can't just be the community of learners and the community of educators. It needs to involve the community of parents as well. the school governing body, because schools are a small microcosm of what's happening elsewhere in South Africa. So you won't change the attitudes of teachers or of learners if you don't involve the entire learning community. So I think, and again, as you say, of bishops, obviously LGBTI community, they need to address issues of gender, that there's a plethora of things. And as I say, we're dealing with a pandemic, so, we can't just take off little bites. It needs to be a whole process thought through and acted on, Annalie.
So when we saw a lot of social engagement on social media platforms about racism at schools, many old pupils spoke out. And that seems to be problematic in the sense that pupils do not feel they have a voice within these institutions. They feel they only have a voice once they have established themselves years later in the adult community.
Yes, and I think that is what the bishops' learners were drawing attention to. That's why it's so very helpful to have some outside source that pupils can go to, because very often, the white population in South Africa suffers seriously from white fragility, and if a white educator reads a post that suggests that a white learner is feeling victimized because of her race, or that there are racial incidents in the classroom, then, she's going to take it pretty seriously. And it's likely that there will be victimization. So I think that's why it's important, first of all, to start externally, to build a community, to make sure that nobody feels that they're being victimized, but to let schools really understand that racism is a pandemic. All schools suffer from racism. All of us as South Africans, as white South Africans, are racist. We do suffer from white fragility, and most of us, if not all of us, are racist because of our past, because of our history, and because of our lack of contact. So it needs to be addressed, Annalie, in a very broad-based kind of way.
All right, thank you very much. Lots more to talk about there. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there for now. Terry Oakley-Smith, diversity expert, giving us her opinion on the current situation at schools.